Welcome back to the channel. Today's story begins with a simple repair mission, but quickly turns into a journey that challenges everything we know about power, fear, and identity. A human engineer is sent to fix a malfunctioning planetary shield, only to discover that the real problem isn't a machine. It's a young princess carrying the weight of an entire universe within her. Stay with us until the end, because this story isn't just science fiction. It's a powerful reflection on what it truly means to understand, rather than fear, the unknown. This story teaches us that what we fear most is often what we understand least. Princess Lyra was treated as a weapon, a threat, and a disaster waiting to happen, when in reality she was a bridge, a connection to something greater. The real danger was never her power, but the fear, control, and ignorance surrounding it. Through Kale's choice to listen instead of judge, we learn that progress does not come from suppression or domination, but from empathy, cooperation, and courage. True evolution happens when we stop seeing others as problems to be fixed and start seeing them as people to be understood. In the end, the universe wasn't saved by force, but by compassion, trust, and the willingness to change together. They yanked me from the most important project of my life for what they called a simple repair job. Some kind of critical shield malfunction at a royal palace on a planet I'd only read about in textbooks. The money they offered was insane, but what they didn't mention was that the malfunction wasn't a machine. It was the princess. And she was about to become a walking, talking catastrophe. You're not going to believe how a simple human engineer got caught in a royal alien conspiracy, so stick with me for a minute. The ship bucked as it tore through the planet's triple-decker atmosphere, and purple lightning licked at the viewport. My face was glued to the glass as Arvex unfolded below us, a world lit by 3 different suns, one red, one blue, one gold. It was beautiful, but my mind was back on my research on Europa. The pilot's voice crackled. "First time on Arvex?" "Yeah," I mumbled, more to myself than to him. Then the city came into view, and my jaw hit the floor. It was a forest of crystal spires that seemed to sing with light, catching the rays of the 3 suns and turning the whole landscape into a shimmering rainbow. As an engineer, I could see they weren't just buildings. They were massive energy collectors, humming in perfect harmony. But I wasn't here on vacation. The message had been short and scary. Fix the shield, be quiet about it, and don't mess up. They promised me triple my usual pay, but looking at the palace, a mountain of shimmering crystal that made the rest of the city look like a child's toy, I realized I should have asked for 10 times more. The landing pad we were heading for literally appeared out of thin air, a trick of camouflage that made our best military tech look like something you'd find in a cereal box. 6 guards were waiting for us. Each one was 9 feet tall, covered in armor that shifted colors like oil on water, and had a second pair of glowing eyes on their temples. Just a little intimidating. "Engineer Cale Morrison," the lead guard's voice rumbled in my chest, not from his mouth. "You will follow." No hello, no welcome to Arvex, just pure, uncut suspicion. I grabbed my toolkit and followed them into a transport tube that felt like a roller coaster designed by a mad genius. We zipped through hallways that twisted upside down and sideways, past fountains where water flowed uphill, each drop holding a tiny glowing world. It was a dizzying reminder that I was way out of my league. They finally dropped me off in a place they called the Energy Garden. It was a huge greenhouse where the plants weren't made of leaves and stems, but of pure, solid light. The air buzzed and made the hairs on my arm stand up. "The shield generators are through there," the guard said, pointing at a path. "Wait for a royal escort." With that, they vanished, leaving me alone. I couldn't resist. I pulled out my scanner and pointed it at the nearest flower, a blossom whose petals kept phasing in and out of existence. "They're incredible, aren't they?" The voice nearly made me drop my scanner. I spun around to see a young woman watching me, She wasn't a guard. She was dressed in robes that looked like they were made from captured starlight, and she had the same 4 eyes as the guards. But hers were soft and curious. She was beautiful in a way that my brain couldn't quite process, like she was bending the space around her just by standing there. Yeah, I stammered, trying to sound smart. The quantum phase variance is something else. You actually understand it, she said, stepping closer. I could smell ozone and something like jasmine. Most humans just get headaches. I'm Lyra. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. Princess Lyra, the heir to the entire planet. I'd seen her portrait in the briefing files. I managed a clumsy half-bow. Your Highness, I'm Cale Morrison. I'm here to, fix the shields. She laughed, a sound like tiny bells. Please, just Lyra. I get enough of the Your Highness stuff all day, she said, her voice warm. Tell me about Earth. As she spoke, she reached a hand toward one of the phasing flowers. And that's when my blood ran cold. As her fingers got close, the flower didn't just change color. It pulsed with new light, with frequencies my scanner screamed shouldn't exist. It was a tiny, impossible event, a flicker in reality itself. I should really get to work, I said suddenly, grabbing my kit. The malfunction, you know, could be dangerous. Lyra's smile faltered. Oh, of course. The generator is just through there. I practically ran, my heart hammering in my chest. What I had just seen wasn't in any of the official reports. That wasn't just alien biology. She had literally warped reality with a wave of her hand. I finally reached the generator room, a massive cavern with a pulsating crystal core at its center. 3 alien technicians were at the controls, their 6-fingered hands gliding over glowing surfaces. They barely looked at me. The human engineer, one stated. The problem started 72 hours ago. Energy spikes. We think something is interfering with it. I plugged my gear in and the data confirmed it. The shield wasn't broken. It was being actively disrupted by a strange signal, a signal that was coming from inside the palace. Has anything changed recently? I asked. New equipment? Different schedules? The technicians all looked at each other, their extra eyelids fluttering nervously. Nothing important, one finally said. Princess Lyra has been practicing for a festival, but that's all. It was a lie, a bad one. My instruments were telling me a completely different story. Something was messing with the system. A phantom signal, coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Has anything in the palace changed recently? Cale asked. New tech? Different staff routines? The alien technicians shot each other a look, their secondary eyelids fluttering in a quick, nervous rhythm. Nothing major, one of them said, a little too carefully. Princess Lyra has been practicing with ceremonial energy weapons for the upcoming festival, but that shouldn't affect the shields. Cale just grunted, but his instruments were telling him a completely different story. He isolated the interference pattern and started to trace it back through the palace's energy grid. The signal's path wound through data streams and power lines, past countless backup systems, until the coordinates landed squarely on the royal family's private quarters. A faint tremor vibrated through the floor, almost unnoticeable, but Cale's gear shrieked with warnings about a massive energy surge. The lights flickered for a split second, and then, just as suddenly as it began, the disturbance was gone. The technicians went back to work as if nothing had happened. Does that happen a lot? Cale asked, choosing his words carefully. Does what happen? The lead technician replied, his voice perfectly flat. But the frantic darting of his eyes told Cale everything he needed to know about the tremor and the power surge. For the next hour, I worked silently, pretending to diagnose the shield. But I was really building a case. The malfunction was getting stronger, the heartbeat growing louder, and I was the only one in the palace who knew the truth. I had been sent to fix a machine, but I had discovered a secret that could get me killed, or worse, could cause the entire palace to explode. The only question was, what was I going to do about it? They figured I was just some human contractor, hired to fix a glitch they were too proud to solve themselves. But this wasn't just a glitch. Whatever was causing the interference felt alive. I told them I had to check the secondary generator nodes, and you could almost feel their collective eye roll. But if my hunch was right, this entire palace was built on a ticking time bomb. Stick around, because you're about to see what happens when the little guy stumbles upon a royal secret that could shatter an entire world. They handed me a navigational crystal, and I set off alone, following its glowing path through hallways that seemed to twist reality itself. I walked past windows showing impossible skies, past guards frozen like statues but crackling with deadly energy, and through rooms where ancient artifacts hummed with a power that made my teeth ache. The first node was inside what looked like a meditation room. I ran my scans, and there it was again, that strange interference, only stronger this time. I took my notes and moved on, node after node, slowly building a three-dimensional map of the disturbance in my head. And the picture that started to form made my blood run cold. The signal was coming from the royal quarters, from a suite of rooms my little crystal guide marked as off-limits. It was Princess Lyra's private chambers. I stood there, staring at the holographic map floating in front of me, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to just pack my tools and run. This was way above my pay grade. This wasn't some busted circuit. This was something dangerous. But the engineer in me just couldn't let it go. I was so lost in the data, trying to solve the puzzle, that I never heard her approach. A hand on my shoulder made me jump out of my skin. I spun around, my heart pounding, and there she was, Princess Lyra. In the low light, her bioluminescent eyes seemed to glow even brighter, making her look like something from a dream. "You're very committed to your work," she said, her voice calm. "Most contractors would have just sent a report and called it a day." I swallowed hard. The interference is getting worse. I stuck to the technical facts. It was safer that way. If we don't stop it, the entire shield network could collapse. "And you've tracked the source to my rooms," she stated. It wasn't a question. Her 4 eyes studied me with an unnerving curiosity I couldn't decipher. "So what are you going to do?" "I need more data," I stammered. "The patterns don't match anything I've ever seen. It's almost like something is trying to talk through the shields." Lyra drifted past me to the massive window. Outside, the city glittered under 3 different suns, trapped in a permanent state of morning, noon, and evening all at once. "My people have an old saying," she said softly. "The truth hides in the light between lights." "What do you see in your data, Engineer Morrison?" Before I could even think of an answer, she reached out and pressed her palm against the window. The transparent aluminum began to hum, and shimmering patterns of light, the exact same impossible frequencies I'd been tracking, spiraled out from her hand. My scanner went absolutely haywire, screaming about a dozen laws of physics being broken at once. "Your Highness?" I started. "I know what I am," Lyra cut me off, her voice now filled with strange new harmonics. "What I don't know is why. Why these shields, built by my ancestors, are reacting to me. Why my own mother looks at me like I'm a loaded weapon," she whispered, pulling her hand away from the window. The light faded. When she turned back to me, I finally saw it. Underneath the royal composure, there was fear. Pure, raw fear in the eyes of a princess who probably hadn't shown weakness to anyone in her entire life. "You're not the first engineer they've called," she admitted. "The others either found nothing or they found me and decided to lie. But you're different. You saw me in the garden and you didn't run. You tracked this all the way to my doorstep and didn't call the guards. Why?" My throat felt like sandpaper. Protocol, my contract, common sense, everything told me to report this immediately. A royal was messing with the planetary defense system. But looking at her, so young and scared of her own power, I heard myself telling the truth. "Because running away doesn't fix the problem," I said. "And because—" I paused, then pushed forward. "Because I don't think you're doing this on purpose. The patterns are a reaction, not an attack. The palace systems are responding to you, not the other way around." A flicker of hope crossed her face. You could help me? Help me understand it? Control it? I'd need to analyze more data, run diagnostics. It would mean... I trailed off, realizing the implication of what I was saying. It would mean working directly with me, she finished for me. Studying my biofield, getting close. Her smile was heartbreakingly sad. And that's why you ran in the garden, isn't it? You can sense the danger. Your Highness, please. Just Lyra, she insisted. If we're going to figure this out, we have to be honest. She motioned to my holographic display. Show me everything you've found. Against all my better judgment, I expanded the data stream. The palace appeared as a miniature, its shield network glowing. The interference pulsed from a single bright spot. Lyra's rooms. It's beautiful, she breathed, reaching for the display. As her hand got closer, the hologram flared, the patterns shifting and becoming more complex. It's like seeing my own heartbeat in light. Don't touch it, I warned, but it was too late. Her fingers grazed the glowing node that marked her location. The hologram exploded in a flash of blinding light. For a split second, I saw a vision. The palace in ruins, its crystal towers shattered. The three suns were dim and dying, and the planet itself was cracked like an egg, its fiery core bleeding into the vacuum of space. And in the middle of it all was a figure, inhaling starlight and screaming without a sound as reality tore itself apart. The vision vanished in less than a second as the hologram overloaded, plunging us into darkness. Red emergency lights flickered on, bathing the gallery in a hellish glow. Lyra was frozen, her hand still out, her eyes wide with shock. Did you see a probability cascade? I asked, my training kicking in automatically. When quantum systems and consciousness interact, sometimes they show possible futures. It doesn't mean... Stop. Her voice was an empty whisper. Don't lie to make me feel better. We both saw it. Just then, alarms started blaring through the palace, and the floor beneath us trembled violently. Whatever we did, it sent a shockwave through the entire planetary grid. I have to go, Lyra said, backing away. My mother will have questions. They'll all want answers. I'm sorry, Engineer Morrison. I really hoped you could help me figure out what I am before it was too late. She turned and ran before I could say a word, leaving me alone with my fried scanner and the horrifying certainty that I had just seen the beginning of the end. The princess wasn't just a royal. She was a living apocalypse, getting more unstable by the second. And I was the only person who knew. The palace emergency systems turned the corridors into a shifting maze of energy barriers. I just followed the rush of frantic personnel, clutching my useless scanner and trying to process what I'd just seen. That vision, call it a probability cascade or whatever you want, it felt too real to be just a warning. I had to get to the shield system's core programming, but first I had to get through the organized chaos of a full-blown palace lockdown. Armored guards sprinted past, their suits now glowing with active defense fields. Technicians were shouting in their native language, which sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. Engineer Morrison! A voice I recognized cut through the noise. It was the lead guard from when I first arrived, his four eyes locked on me. You will report to technical command. Now. It wasn't a suggestion. I followed him, noticing how his hand never left the beautiful and probably deadly crystal weapon on his hip. We went down, level after level, into parts of the palace where the walls themselves seemed to be alive, pulsing with light. This palace wasn't just a building. It was a living thing, and its immune system was kicking into overdrive. Technical command was a massive sphere with no floor or ceiling. Workstations and technicians floated everywhere, moving with an easy grace in zero gravity. In the center of it all, a giant hologram showed the shield network in real time. The interference patterns I had been tracking were now visible for all to see, spreading from Lyra's chambers like ripples in a pond. Explain, a sharp voice commanded. It was a senior officer, her robes marking her as the one in charge, and the way she said it made it sound like an accusation. They told me I was being called in to fix a faulty shield network. A simple engineering problem, they said. But when I got there, I realized they'd lied. The problem wasn't a machine. It was a terrified young girl named Lyra, the princess, and they were treating her like a monster in a key. Her own people were so scared of her they were willing to let their entire world crumble just to keep her locked away. What would you do if you were the only person who saw a lonely girl instead of a monster? Stick with me, because what happened next changed everything. My screen showed the chaos her energy was causing, but when I looked closer, it wasn't just random noise. It was a pattern, almost like a song. The entire palace, a machine the size of a city, was trying to harmonize with her, but it couldn't handle her unique frequency. It was like an orchestra trying to play a beautiful, complex new piece of music, but all their instruments were out of tune. The other technicians just saw dangerous interference. I was starting to see a desperate attempt to communicate. She's broadcasting on a spectrum that shouldn't even be possible for a living being, I tried to explain. The head technician, a stuffy old alien who looked at me like I was dirt on his shoe, just scoffed. Your human tech can map the problem, but it can't solve it. Right then, the whole palace groaned, shaking hard. Red alert lights flashed as energy bolts shot between the glittering towers outside. The protective shield around the city flickered like a dying candle. We have to isolate her, I said, my heart pounding. Create a dead zone around her room before she tears the whole network apart. You want us to imprison the heir to the throne in an energy cage? The technician sneered. That requires royal approval. He was more worried about politics than the city falling apart around us. Then get it, I shot back, pointing at my screen where the red lines were spiking into oblivion. Because if you don't, the next power surge won't just take out the palace, it'll crash the entire planet's defense grid. After a tense, silent exchange with the others, the technician turned back to me, his eyes cold. The Queen will see you now. She will decide. As two massive guards escorted me through the ancient crystal corridors, I felt like I was walking to my own execution. How was I, a simple human engineer, supposed to convince an all-powerful alien queen to not treat her own daughter like a weapon? The throne room doors dissolved like mist, revealing a chamber that seemed to stretch into infinity, with walls that were windows to other galaxies. And in the center of it all sat the Queen. Queen Arvexia was more than a ruler. She was a force of nature. Reality itself seemed to bend around her throne. Her voice didn't come from her mouth, but from the air, the walls, and the space inside my own head. Engineer Morrison, she resonated. You have been in my palace for exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes, and you've already found what my best minds have been trying to hide for months. I tried to give her the technical summary, but she cut me off, rising from her throne and suddenly appearing right in front of me. I didn't ask for a summary, she said, her 4 piercing eyes looking straight through me. I asked what you have learned. My technical knowledge meant nothing here. This was a test. Taking a deep breath, I gave her the only answer I had. I've learned that your daughter is terrified, I said softly, and that everyone around her is so afraid of what she is, they've forgotten who she is. A flicker of surprise crossed the Queen's face. She turned to a window showing a raging sandstorm on some distant world. Do you know what Lyra is, engineer? She asked. Neither do we. She told me everything. Lyra was born during a cosmic event that woke up ancient technology deep inside the planet. Her birth was so violent it killed 3 doctors and warped time in the medical bay. Her powers had only grown since. She could interface with machines just by thinking, and ancient systems hummed to life whenever she was near. And now, the Queen said, turning back to me, you tell me she is harmonizing with our planetary defenses. We can't help her, I insisted. We could create a harmonic buffer to help her control it. The Queen let out a bitter laugh. You saw a glimpse of the future in your data, didn't you? The ruins, the dying suns. My blood ran cold. "How did you know?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with an ancient sadness. "Because I've seen it too. A future where my daughter becomes a living weapon that consumes worlds. So tell me, engineer, would you cage that weapon to save everyone else?" "She's not a weapon," I argued. "She's a child who needs help." The Queen's expression hardened. "Let me show you." Suddenly, the throne room vanished. My mind was flooded with her memories. Lyra as a little girl, accidentally turning her pet to dust while trying to heal its broken wing. Lyra as a teenager, her angry outburst causing every plant in the royal gardens to wither and die, their life force feeding her own. I saw her brush against an ancient relic, causing an explosion that took 2 guards with it. I saw the secret, horrifying experiments. Scientists left as drooling vegetables after trying to connect with her mind. One man, before he went completely insane, claimed he had witnessed the birth and death of entire universes just by looking at her cells. The vision ended, and I collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. "Now you understand," the Queen said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "My daughter is a bridge to something we were never meant to be." I struggled to my feet, my mind reeling, but my gut telling me they were all wrong. "You've all been trying to block her, to build a cage," I said, the idea hitting me like lightning. "But what if she's not the problem? What if she's the solution? What if you need to stop fighting her and start listening?" That one simple idea changed everything. We built her not a key, but a translator, a way for her to speak to the planetary systems she was connected to. And we discovered the truth. Lyra wasn't a weapon of destruction. She was the consciousness of the planet itself, waking up. The malfunctions were her trying to tell them about a new, clean energy source deep underground that would save their civilization. Lyra went from being a prisoner to their greatest hero, and I became the human who taught them that sometimes the greatest monsters are just people you haven't taken the time to understand. Imagine being so powerful you could shatter reality itself, but so dangerous you couldn't hug your own mother. That's Princess Lyra's life, and everyone in the palace agreed. She was becoming a time bomb. The real question was, could they build a box strong enough to hold her when she finally went off? Suddenly, a chime echoed through the throne room. An urgent message flashed on a nearby screen, showing a frantic guard. "Your Majesty, it's a code red. Princess Lyra is gone. She's vanished from her room, and all our sensors are going haywire around her last known position." The Queen's face turned to stone. "Find her," she commanded, her voice dangerously low. "Be discreet. No one else needs to know." The screen went blank. The Queen then turned her ancient eyes on Kyle, a simple human engineer, as if weighing the fate of the galaxy itself. "You have a decision to make, Engineer Morrison. You can leave right now. Go back to your ship, file a report saying our shields are just acting up because of a solar flare, and forget everything you saw here. Or—" She trailed off, letting the silence hang in the air. "Or you can stay and help us with a problem that might just be impossible to solve. But I need you to understand, if you stay, you belong to us. What you learn here, what you witness, it will die with you." Kyle's mind flashed back to the observation deck. He remembered the look on Lyra's face, the raw fear in her eyes, but also that flicker of desperate hope when she asked if he could figure out what was happening to her. He remembered the terrifying vision she'd shown him, a dying world, reality cracking like glass. How could he just walk away from that? "I'll stay," he heard himself say, the words feeling heavier than he expected. The Queen gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Very well. In that case, you're going to need this." A guard stepped forward, holding a lavishly decorated box. Kyle opened it to find a neural device unlike anything he'd ever seen. It looked like it was grown, not built, a mix of crystal and living tissue that pulsed with a soft inner light. "It's our most advanced consciousness shield," the Queen explained. It should protect you from the worst of her outbursts. Probably. She sighed. Nothing is certain when it comes to my daughter. The alien queen sank back onto her throne, and for the first time she looked weary, almost defeated. Find her, engineer. Help her if you can. And if you can't... She paused, her voice trembling slightly. Stop her if you have to. But for all our sakes, do it quickly. The convergence is coming. She didn't have to explain what that meant. Kyle could feel it in his bones. He gave a slight bow. It just felt right, and let the guards lead him out. The neural shield was warm as he pressed it to his temple, its alien technology syncing with his nervous system in a way that made all his human gear feel like children's toys. He had a job to do. Find a terrified princess who could unmake the universe and hopefully save a world. He felt a sinking feeling in his gut, the terrible knowledge that he was in way over his head. The crystalline shield pulsed softly against his head as he hurried to the engineering lab. The Queen's guards had granted him top-level access, showing him schematics of the palace that weren't just blueprints, but maps of energy, consciousness, and even places where the fabric of reality was thin. If you were a girl whose very presence warped space-time, you'd hide in one of those spots. With the new device, the palace became a different world. He could see energy flowing through the walls in colors he couldn't name. He could feel the building breathing around him, and everywhere, like a faint, unsettling perfume, he could sense Lyra's trail. Places where reality was just a little bent, where the air vibrated at a frequency that shouldn't be possible. The workshop was a stunning mix of alien artistry and raw function, with tools floating in perfectly arranged patterns, each one a century ahead of human tech. Kyle jumped onto a workstation and started crunching the data, comparing the palace's most shielded rooms with the strange energy readings he was getting. 3 places stood out: the ancient meditation chambers deep in the palace's foundation, the zero-point energy lab in the off-limits research wing, and an old, abandoned stargazing dome. Each spot was isolated enough to potentially hide Lyra from the palace's regular sensors. Just as he was about to grab his gear, he heard footsteps. He spun around to see 3 Zythera technicians walking towards him. These weren't guards. They were the guys from the shield control center, and they looked seriously angry. "You're the human," the leader snarled, his weird, time-bending eyes glowing with menace. "The one who told the queen to lock the princess in a cage." "Whoa, hold on," Kyle said, holding up his hands. "I suggested temporary shielding to stop a catastrophic failure. It's about safety, not treating her like a monster." The lead technician stalked closer, and Kyle felt the energy in the room shift, becoming heavy and hostile. "Do you have any idea what she means to us?" he hissed. "She isn't just a princess. She's the next stage of our evolution. She is our future. An evolution that could get every single person on this planet killed," Kyle shot back. Another technician moved to his left, boxing him in. "Your primitive species sees destruction," the technician said coldly. "We see transformation. You humans are afraid of change. We welcome it." The air started to crackle. Kyle's neural shield flared with a silent alarm, warning him of the rising threat. It hit him then. These guys weren't just techs. They were fanatics, believers in a cult that saw Lyra's terrifying condition as some kind of divine gift. "I'm trying to help her," Kyle said, his voice firm. "If we can just figure out what's happening to her." "Figure it out?" The lead tech let out a laugh that sounded like shattering glass. "You've been here for a few hours. We have studied her for years. What makes you think your backwards little gadgets can possibly understand what our greatest minds can't?" "Because I'm not trying to worship her or turn her into a weapon," Kyle said, his voice ringing with conviction. "I'm just trying to keep her from dying." The words stunned them into silence. The technicians exchanged uneasy glances, their anger suddenly fading. After a long moment, the leader took a step back. "The observation dome," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She goes there when it gets to be too much." He then locked eyes with Kyle. "But listen to me, human. If you hurt her, if you try to stop what she's becoming, no royal decree in the galaxy will be able to save you." They turned and left, but the threat hung in the air like the smell of smoke. Kyle quickly grabbed his gear and made for the dome, his head spinning. There were factions inside the palace, some who saw Lyra as a savior, others who saw her as the apocalypse. Suddenly he understood why the queen had called in a total outsider. The path to the dome led him through forgotten parts of the palace. Dust motes danced in beams of tri-colored light from the windows. The energy here felt ancient, humming along pathways built centuries ago. His footsteps echoed down corridors lined with star charts of galaxies Kyle had never even heard of. Maybe they didn't exist anymore. The dome itself was breathtaking. A perfect sphere of crystal, floating like a soap bubble at the very top of the palace. It gave a perfect, unbroken view of the alien sky. Old, forgotten telescopes and scanners sat under dusty sheets. And there, in the very center, sat Lyra, curled into a small ball. She looked up when he came in. Kyle could see she had been crying, or whatever her species did. Shimmering, glowing tracks stained her cheeks, and her 4 eyes held a weariness so deep it made her look ancient. "They told you where I was, didn't they?" she asked, her voice flat. "Some technicians who called themselves the Ascendants," Kyle replied. "They seem to think you're the next step in evolution." Lyra let out a bitter little laugh. "The Ascendants. They've been hovering over me my whole life, just waiting for me to hatch into some kind of cosmic god. They don't want to see the people who get hurt, the things I break by accident, the way everything I get close to either me or twists into something horrible." Kyle set his gear down and walked toward her slowly, like he was approaching a frightened deer. "Your mother told me about the incidents, the failed experiments." "Incidents?" she repeated, the word sounding strange and foreign. "Is it an incident when you can't even control your own thoughts without ripping a hole in the wall? When just feeling sad can cause an energy storm?" Her hands clenched into fists, and he saw tiny bolts of impossible light flicker between her fingers. "I haven't been able to touch another person in 3 years. Do you know what that feels like?" she whispered. "No hugs, no one to hold your hand. Anyone who gets that close to me, they get burned." "I know," Kyle said softly. "I read the reports." "Then why are you here?" she asked, and all 4 of her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made the shield on his head buzz. "Everyone else either runs away from me or tries to use me. The Ascendants want me to just let go, let this power swallow me whole so they can watch what happens. The generals want to point me at our enemies. My own mother just wants to lock me away. But you, what is it that you want?" Kyle thought about it for a second. What did he want? He was just a mechanic who'd been hired to fix a shield. He never signed up for royal politics or saving the universe. But as he looked at Lyra, so young, so powerful, and so completely alone, the answer came to him. "I just want to understand it," he said, his voice full of a sincerity that surprised even him. "Not to control it, or worship it, or use it, just to understand it. Because maybe, if we can figure out what it is, we can find a way for you to actually live with it." "Live with it?" Her voice broke. "I saw that vision too, the one I showed you, the dead planet, reality shattering to pieces. That's not a possibility. It's a promise. This power is growing every single day. Soon I won't even be able to do this much." She gestured around her, and for the first time, Kyle noticed a faint, shimmering field that surrounded her, separating her from the rest of the room. It was a bubble of distorted space, and he suddenly realized the incredible, constant effort it must take her to hold it together, just to keep from tearing everything apart. "Let me see it," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Lyra's eyes shot open. "See what?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I need you to let go, just a little, in a controlled way." Let me scan what's happening. Map the energy, he explained, already pulling out his strange equipment. A crystalline screen flickered to life. The palace systems are failing because they're trying to sync with you, but they can't lock onto your frequency. And if you find that frequency, I'll die, she stated, her voice chillingly certain. Everyone who's tried a direct analysis is either dead or has lost their mind. That's why your mother gave me this, Kyle said, tapping a device on his temple. It's a neural shield, the latest tech for consciousness protection. That's a military prototype, Lyra breathed, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. How did she? She trailed off, a look of dawning horror on her face. She's that desperate. Desperate enough to use untested alien technology on a human, Kyle agreed softly. Your mother loves you, Lyra. She's just terrified, and that's why she's willing to try anything, even calling in an outsider like me. Lyra didn't answer for a long time, her gaze lost in the sky where 3 suns painted the horizon in impossible colors. When she finally spoke, her voice was a fragile whisper. I have dreams about other worlds, places I've never seen, in galaxies that might not even be real. I watch stars being born, and I see entire civilizations crumble to dust. Sometimes, when I wake up, it takes hours for me to remember which reality is mine. She finally turned to look at him, her eyes pleading. What if I'm not turning into something new? What if I'm just falling apart? Then we'll find a way to put you back together, he promised. Kyle finished his setup, casting a shimmering scanning field around the two of them. Okay, start small, he instructed. Just let the containment field around you waver a tiny bit. Show me what happens when you're not fighting it with everything you've got. Lyra stared at him with those incredible eyes, as if she were weighing his life against her own fear. After a long moment, she gave a single, slow nod. The shift was barely noticeable at first. The very air in the room seemed to thicken, buzzing with raw potential. Kyle's instruments lit up, registering energy signatures on spectrums he didn't even have names for. The containment field around Lyra flickered, thinned out, and then she gently touched the floor. Where her palm met the crystal, the world began to change. It wasn't destruction. It was a total transformation. The crystal floor began to hum, its very molecules rearranging themselves into new, impossible patterns that should have been unstable, but somehow held together perfectly. Light itself seemed to bend around her hand, creating halos of pure, shimmering possibility. Kyle's scanners shrieked, flashing warnings as they struggled to comprehend what was happening. Incredible, he whispered, completely ignoring the alarms. You're not destroying matter. You're teaching it a new way to exist. The frequencies, Kyle, Lyra said, her voice strained with effort. I can't. The transformation suddenly sped up. The new, intricate patterns on the floor spread outward like a fractal bloom. Arcs of raw energy sizzled through the air, and Kyle felt his neural shield grow hot as it fought to protect his mind from whatever she was broadcasting. Pull back now, he shouted, his voice urgent. Slowly. Don't fight it. Just guide it. I can't, she cried, and the fear in her voice was raw and primal. It wants to spread. It wants to change everything. I can feel the whole palace, the whole planet. If I let go, then don't let go. Just focus on my voice, Kyle said, stepping closer, fighting every self-preservation instinct that screamed at him to run. You're not losing control, you're just expanding, but you need to give it direction or a limit. You have to choose. How? She sobbed, and her glowing tears began to float in the supercharged air around them. How do I choose when I can feel infinity? Right then, Kyle made a split-second decision that probably saved both of their lives. He reached out and grabbed her free hand. The shock of contact was like a bolt of lightning. Even with the neural shield, he felt his mind being stretched thin across different dimensions. For one breathtaking second, he saw what she saw. He didn't just see the room. He saw the quantum foam bubbling beneath reality itself, the streams of probability that decided what was real and what wasn't. the cosmic web that tied every single atom together across all of space and time. It was beautiful, it was horrifying, and it was way too much for a human mind to handle. But it wasn't random. It was a pattern, structured like the most impossibly complex math equation he'd ever imagined. "I see it," he gasped. "The pattern. You're not random at all. You're vibrating in sync with some kind of cosmic frequency." And at that moment, the dome above them shattered. It didn't explode. It cracked, as if reality itself had just broken apart. Through the fractures, Kyle saw glimpses of other skies, other worlds, even other versions of themselves having the exact same conversation. All at once, every piece of observation equipment in the room, dormant for decades, roared to life as Lyra's power surge activated them. Alarms blared throughout the palace. The floor beneath their feet began to shift between states: solid, liquid, plasma, and something else that had no name. Kyle squeezed Lyra's hand, using their new connection to send his thoughts directly into her mind. "Contract," he thought at her. "Pull it all back in. You're a star that's gone supernova. You need to become a white dwarf, dense, controlled, and contained." Whether she heard his words or just understood what he meant, Lyra responded. The chaos began to slow, then it started to reverse. The shattered dome pulled itself back together, though the cracks remained, hanging in the air like scars. The transformed crystal floor kept its new, beautiful patterns, but it stopped spreading. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Lyra collapsed, her hand slipping from his grasp. Kyle caught her just before she hit the floor. His neural shield finally began to cool down as her energy field shrank back to its normal state. She was unconscious, but she was breathing, assuming Zithians even breathed the same way humans did. "Don't move!" a sharp voice commanded from behind him. Kyle turned his head to see a full squadron of royal guards with their weapons aimed right at them. At the center stood the queen, her face a mask of stone. "What did you do?" she demanded. "My job," Kyle said, his exhaustion making him brave. "I collected data, I ran a few tests, and I almost got my brain scrambled by your daughter's cosmic awakening. You know, the usual." The queen stepped forward, her 4 eyes scanning the transformed floor, the scarred dome, and the unconscious princess in Kyle's arms. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was less like a queen and more like a mother. "Is she alive?" "Exhausted, but alive," Kyle answered, shifting Lyra's weight as his muscles began to ache. "And I know what's happening to her now. I don't know how to stop it, not yet, but I finally understand the mechanics of it." "Tell me," the queen commanded. "Not here," he insisted. "She needs a medic, and I need to analyze this data before the memory of what I saw fades." He locked eyes with the queen, his gaze unwavering. "Your Majesty, your daughter isn't becoming a weapon. She's becoming a bridge. The only question is, a bridge to what?" The queen gave a signal, and 2 guards stepped forward to take Lyra. Kyle reluctantly let her go, his hand still tingling where they had touched. The connection had left a mark on him, something deeper than physical. He could still feel the echo of that cosmic viewpoint, like he was peeking at the entire universe through a tiny keyhole. "You took an unacceptable risk," the queen said as they walked back toward the main palace. "If she had completely lost control—" "She was going to lose control anyway, sooner or later," Kyle interrupted. "At least this way, we actually learned something." He pulled up his scanner, showing her the initial readings. "Look at these patterns. They're not chaotic. They match theoretical models of dimensional interfaces. Your daughter isn't creating this power. She's pulling it from somewhere else." The queen stopped in her tracks. Around them, the palace was buzzing with emergency crews, but in that moment, it was like they were in their own bubble. "Are you saying she's connected to another dimension?" "I'm saying," Kyle corrected. That she's connected to all of them. Every possible reality, every quantum state, every possible version of matter and energy that could ever exist. Kyle ran a shaky hand through his hair, trying to wrap his own mind around what he had just seen. The real questions are why? What started this connection? And more importantly, what's on the other side trying to get through? The Queen's expression turned grim. If you are right. Before she could finish, a new alarm blared through the palace, a sound different from the security alerts. Kyle's translator device struggled for a second before spitting out the words in a flat tone. Temporal anomaly detected. Causality shields failing. All personnel report to emergency stations. Through a nearby window, Kyle saw something that shouldn't be possible. The three sons of Arvex were moving, not in their usual graceful dance across the heavens, but sliding across the sky like giant spotlights. Their colors were shifting through parts of the spectrum that physically hurt to look at. "It's starting," the Queen whispered, her voice filled with dread. "The convergence. We're out of time." Kyle looked down at his scanner, at the data that might hold the secret to Lyra's powers. Then he looked at the Queen, whose royal composure had finally cracked, revealing the terrified mother underneath. "Then we'd better work fast," he said, his voice steady, "because I have a feeling your daughter isn't the only thing in this universe that's changing, and whatever is coming for us, she might be the only chance we have of surviving it." The throne room had been turned into a war room. Holographic displays floated in the air like ghosts, each one showing a different, terrifying aspect of the crisis. Outside, the three sons continued their unnatural slide across the sky, their movements causing gravitational waves that made the entire palace groan and shudder. Ministers, generals, and scientists were huddled in tense groups, their anxious voices blending into a symphony of barely controlled panic. Kyle stood right beside the Queen's throne, clutching his datapad like it was the only solid thing in the universe. He had spent the last hour putting everything together: the energy readings from Lyra's power surge, the dimensional frequency patterns, and the terrifying glimpse of cosmic connection he'd felt when he touched her hand. It all painted a picture that a part of him desperately wished he could forget. "Report," the Queen's voice commanded, cutting through the chaos like a diamond. "Imagine holding the key to save a world that sees you as nothing more than a curious pet." That's where I was, standing in the throne room as the most powerful beings in the system fell apart. General Thexus, a warrior who looked like he was carved from granite, was the first to crack. "The convergence is speeding up," he announced, his voice tight. "At this rate, the suns will align in less than 36 hours. Another official, a floating jellyfish of a creature, chimed in. "Our defensive systems are failing. The old sites are lighting up with energy we haven't seen in 1,000 years, and the gravity waves are tearing our evacuation ships apart. We've already lost 3. The Queen simply said the population was restless. I knew what that really meant. They were terrified. And if you knew you were trapped on a planet about to be ripped apart, wouldn't you be too? These aliens were an ancient, powerful civilization, but facing total extinction? That'll unravel anyone. "And my daughter?" the Queen asked. Her voice was perfectly level, but I could hear the desperate mother underneath. "She's stable, but still unconscious," the medical officer reported. "Her brain activity is off the charts. It's like she's dreaming in frequencies we can't even properly measure." That's when I couldn't stay silent anymore. Every eye in the room, dozens of them, in all shapes and colors, snapped to me, the lone human. "She's not just dreaming," I said. "She's navigating." The Queen stared me down. "Explain." Her command cut through the tension like a knife. I pulled out my datapad and threw my findings into the room's holographic display. When I touched Princess Lyra's mind during her last power surge, I felt a tiny piece of what she feels all the time, I explained. She isn't just seeing other dimensions, she's living in them. The dreams are her mind trying to sort through information from 1,000,000 different realities at once. A scientist scoffed. "That's impossible. No mind could process that much data." And that's why she's been having these uncontrollable power surges, I shot back. It's a system overload. But look here, I highlighted a few glowing lines of data. These energy patterns perfectly match our old theories about quantum consciousness bridges, basically a mind that can exist in multiple realities at the same time. The Queen's voice was dangerously quiet. You're saying my daughter is a multidimensional being? No, I said, taking a huge risk. I'm saying something chose her to become one. Think about it. She was born during the last convergence, and her powers are peaking just as this new one arrives. Something is using her as an anchor to get into our reality. A wave of arguments erupted, scientists shouting about impossibilities, generals about threats, and politicians about panic. The Queen let them argue, her 4 eyes locked on my data. Finally, she raised a hand. Enough? The room went dead silent. Engineer Morrison? She said, using my name for the first time. If you are right, what do we do? I took a deep breath. We have to wake her up, not just her body, but her mind. We need to teach her how to consciously control this connection, to navigate the storm instead of being tossed around by it. The medical officer started to protest. The risk of that? The risk of doing nothing is the end of your world, I interrupted. Every second we wait, the convergence gets stronger. The suns, the system failures, it's all tied to her, I pressed on. She's the focal point, which means she could be the key to stopping it. General Thexus stepped toward me, his shadow falling over me like a threat. Or she could lose control and shatter reality itself. You're asking us to bet our entire planet on a wild theory from an alien. You're already betting, I snapped back. You're betting that this will all just magically fix itself. My plan is a long shot, but at least it's a shot. Yours is just waiting to die. Just then, the entire palace shuddered, not from an earthquake, but from something deeper. For a split second, the world fractured. I saw the throne room as a ruin, then as an untouched forest, then as a swirl of pure energy, all layered on top of each other. The conflicting images made my head pound. A guard flickered into existence nearby. Your Majesty, the princess, she's awake, and she's asking for the human. The Queen stood, all doubt gone from her face. Clear this room. Senior staff only. She turned to me. You wanted a chance, Engineer Morrison. You've got it. I hope for your sake you're right. The trip to the medical wing was a nightmare. Hallways twisted into impossible shapes, lights flickered, and I saw our reflections in the crystal walls moving on their own. The very fabric of the palace was coming apart. Lyra's room was the only stable place, protected by a humming energy shield. She was sitting up in a high-tech bed, looking like she was plugged into a machine. Her 4 eyes were open, but they were seeing things far beyond the walls of the room. Lyra? The Queen said softly, approaching her daughter's bed. Lyra's voice echoed, as if 100 versions of her were speaking at once. I hear everything. Past, present, future. It's all so loud. The walls between worlds are paper thin now, Mother. Her eyes finally focused on me, and for a second, she was just herself again. You touched the stream. You felt it. That was brave, and incredibly stupid. I get that a lot, I said, walking closer. What do you see? The end? She whispered. And the beginning. Looping forever. She gave a weak, broken laugh. This convergence, it isn't natural. Something is pulling the suns together, and it's using me as the rope. It wants in. It's been trying to get in for centuries. She gestured vaguely. Our ancestors were strong enough to keep it out. But I was born a crack in the wall, and now it's breaking me wide open. What is it? The Queen asked, her voice trembling. Lyra's eyes went distant again. It's the next thing. The last thing. It's too big for our words. All I know is that it's ancient, it's hungry, and it thinks I'm a door. Then how do we close the door? The Queen begged, grabbing her daughter's hand. We don't, Lyra said, her gaze snapping back to me. But maybe we can choose what comes through. You saw the patterns in the chaos, didn't you? I nodded, my mind racing. The interface frequencies. If we could change them. Not change them. Harmonize with them, Lyra corrected, sitting up taller as energy crackled around her. The palace systems are fighting me. We need to retune them. Turn the palace into a giant amplifier for my power, not a resistor. That could work, I realized, but the energy needed would be immense. Unless, Lyra finished for me, we use the convergence itself. We channel its power through the palace, through me, and blast it back out in a pattern we control. We turn its own weapon into our shield, I breathed. The Queen started to protest. The risk. Mother, Lyra's voice was soft but unbreakable. The risk is already here. I can feel myself splitting apart, scattering across 1,000 realities. Soon there won't be enough of me left in any single one to hold myself together. This isn't about saving me. It's about choosing how I break. As if on cue, the room flickered, and in the dark I saw dozens of glowing outlines of Lyra, all shimmering around her. How long do we have? I asked. Hours, maybe less, Lyra said, her eyes closed. The thing on the other side is getting impatient. The tremors are at pushing on the door. When the suns align, the door gets kicked wide open, I finished grimly. Unless we open it first, on our terms. Lyra looked at her mother, her voice pleading. I need to get to the heart chamber, the palace's main core. If we're going to turn this building into a dimensional tuning fork, it has to start there. The Queen looked like she had aged 100 years. That chamber has been sealed since the founding of our world. Because the energies there are exactly what we need, Lyra insisted, standing on shaky legs. Mother, please. You've spent my entire life trying to protect me from this power, Lyra said, her voice filled with love and pain. Now please, let me use it to protect everyone else. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Finally, the Queen gave a single, sharp nod. The General will have my head for this. He can get in line, I said, already modifying my scanner. I'm going to need every tech you've got and full access to your labs. I have to build an interface that won't melt. Done, the Queen ordered. Clear a path to the heart chamber. Now. As we turned to leave, Lyra grabbed my arm, her touch sending a jolt of static through me. Have you ever been treated like a problem instead of a person? That's exactly what was happening to Lyra. Her very existence was seen as a glitch in the system. But one man, an engineer named Kyle, saw something more. His touch sent a small spark through her, a little less jarring than before. Thank you, she said, her voice barely a whisper, for seeing me. Kyle gave a tight smile. Thank me when we're not all about to be wiped from existence. But he was thinking, let's just hope we don't open a door to something even worse. Lyra's smile was heartbreakingly wise. Oh, we will, she said, looking out at the 3 suns burning in the sky. The real question is it worse than being erased completely? The 3 of them stood there, a desperate mother, a daughter coming apart at the seams, and a guy who just came to fix a shield and was now trying to rewrite the laws of the universe. Stick with me to see how they pull it off. Behind them, the hospital monitors started screaming, displaying energy readings that were climbing straight up to infinity. The end was coming faster now. It felt like reality itself was getting thin, like an old t-shirt, and on the other side, something Xian and ancient was getting ready to step through. Time was a luxury they just didn't have, and Kyle felt a knot in his stomach. Were they about to make the greatest decision in history, or the absolute worst? Maybe both. They stood before the heart chamber, a place sealed for 3,000 years. It took 6 of the best technicians moving in perfect, silent harmony just to start the unlocking process, their fingers flying over controls older than the entire government. Kyle held his breath as the massive crystal doors spiraled open, revealing a darkness so complete it felt like it was drinking the light from the room. Backup teams are in place, a voice crackled over the comms. It was General Theos, and you could hear the disapproval dripping from every word, even through the static. I still think this is complete madness. The Queen, standing right next to Lyra with a protective hand on her shoulder, didn't even blink. Your objection is noted, General, and ignored, she said, her voice like ice. Begin. Kyle led his small team into the void, his scanner splashing the darkness with weird, shifting colors. The chamber was a perfect sphere carved from a single, massive crystal. The walls were covered in equations that made your head ache if you looked at them too long. And right in the middle, floating in a beam of pure energy, was the palace's mind, its consciousness core. It looked like a 3D mandala woven from pure thought. By the three suns, one of the techs whispered in awe. It's beautiful. It's more than beautiful, it's alive, Kyle corrected him, his eyes glued to the energy readings. This thing has been running on its own for centuries, doing things we probably can't even imagine. He turned to Lyra, his voice softening. You really think you can connect with that? Lyra took a step forward, and the giant crystal brain pulsed as if in greeting. It recognizes me, she said. It's been calling to me my whole life. She stopped at the edge of the energy field. The only question is if I can hold myself together long enough to control it once I'm linked in. The neural buffers will help, Kyle promised, pointing to the gear his team was scrambling to set up. We'll spread the load. Think of my team as fuses, sharing the burden so it doesn't all hit you at once. The Queen's voice cut through the air, sharp as glass. Fuses? They're all volunteers, Your Majesty, Kyle quickly assured her, and we have shielding. The risk is significant, but we can manage it. Define manageable, General Theus grumbled over the comms. Kyle finally snapped. Better than being wiped out of existence, he shot back, tired of the General's constant negativity. Look, we can stand here and argue about safety protocols while the universe collapses around us, or we can actually try to save your world. Make a choice. Now. As if on cue, the whole palace shuddered. But this tremor was different. It wasn't just shaking space. It was shaking time. For a split second, Kyle saw the room as it was being built, and as it would be in ruins, and 1,000 other possibilities all at once. His own neural shield flared hot, fighting to keep his mind from shattering into 1,000,000 pieces. Do it, the Queen ordered, her voice firm. Do whatever it takes. The next hour was a blur of controlled chaos. Kyle's team set up humming interface nodes all around the sphere. The volunteer technicians, looking terrified but resolute, took their positions, their personal shields glowing around them like halos. In the center of it all, they built a platform for Lyra, part medical bed, part high-tech throne, and all a desperate last-ditch effort. Bad news, Theus's voice cut in again. The rebels have broken through the outer perimeter. They're demanding we hand over the princess. They think she's some kind of key to becoming gods. The Queen scoffed. Fanatics. Just what we needed. They're not completely wrong, you know, Lyra said softly from the platform. She was now a spiderweb of cables, connected to the giant crystal brain on one side and Kyle's monitors on the other. What's happening to me? It is a kind of evolution, just not the kind they want. It's not about being saved. It's about being changed into something you might not even call life anymore. Then we'll just have to make sure you stay you, Kyle said, giving one last dial a final, gentle turn. He looked around at the faces in the room. Everybody ready? All he got were grim nods. The volunteers looked like they were facing a firing squad, but they didn't back down. Outside the chamber's transparent walls, the three suns were so close now their fiery atmospheres were starting to touch, swirling together into a terrifying new star. Okay, Lyra, Kyle said, taking a deep breath. Initiating the connection. Take it slow. Let the team take the first hit. Lyra closed her eyes and reached out, her fingers just brushing the pillar of light. The reaction was instant and explosive. The core roared to life, its intricate patterns unfolding into impossible shapes that twisted the laws of physics. Power surged through the network, and every technician's station lit up like a miniature sun. Frequency match at 30%, someone yelled. 40, 50, so holding at 55. It's not enough, Lyra said, her teeth clenched. "The thing on the other side, it's pushing. I need more power." "Opening more channels!" Kyle yelled, his hands a blur over the console. "Team 2, you're on. Don't fight it. Just let it flow through you." More volunteers lit up their stations, pouring their own mental energy into the system. The numbers climbed, 60, 70, 80%. The very air in the chamber began to hum and ripple with visible waves of energy. Suddenly, Lyra's eyes snapped open. They were glowing with the same brilliant light as the core. "Contact," she breathed. "It's here. The presence. It's endless. Ancient. It doesn't understand why we're fighting back." "Can you talk to it?" Kyle asked, his heart pounding. "It doesn't have language. It just is," she strained. "But I can feel what it wants. It sees our entire universe as a cocoon, something to be cracked open to see what comes out. It can't even comprehend that we like our cocoon the way it is." Just then, a massive explosion shook the palace. A real, physical one this time. Through the walls, Kyle saw the bright flashes of weapon fire. The rebels had picked the absolute worst moment to stage their coup. "We're out of time," the Queen yelled. "They'll be in here any second." "Then we're done playing it safe," Kyle decided. "Lyra, I'm taking off the training wheels. Full power. On my mark. 3, 2, 1! The room vanished in a blast of light you didn't see with your eyes, but felt in your soul. Even with his shield, Kyle felt his mind stretch, touching the edges of the cosmic storm Lyra had been living in her whole life. Through the network, he felt the other techs, their minds all connected in one vast web of thought, and pressing in on them all was the entity. It wasn't a creature. It was a concept, a place between realities. It was more patient than time, as inevitable as gravity, and it was so completely alien that the very idea of life as they knew it meant nothing to it. It was pure, unfeeling, cosmic hunger. "I see it," Lyra's thought echoed in all their minds. "The reason. It's not trying to kill us. It wants to collect us. To add our reality to its shelf of consumed universes." An idea born of pure desperation flashed through their shared mind. "Then let's give it something else to eat," Kyle projected to them all. "The energy from the suns. Instead of letting it use that energy as a bridge to get to us, we'll turn it into a poisoned meal." "That's insane," one of the techs thought. "Insane is what we're good at today," Kyle shot back. "Lyra, can you do it? Can you reshape that energy? Make it look delicious to this thing, but in a way that pushes it away instead of inviting it in?" And through their shared mind, they felt Lyra change. She was becoming more than just one person, her mind splitting into countless pieces. But this time, she was in control. Each fragment of her consciousness began to weave the cosmic energy into a new pattern. "It's working," her voice chimed, full of wonder. "It's taking the bait. It's like we're feeding a giant space whale just enough to make it swim away." The crushing pressure on their reality began to fade. The dance of the three suns slowed. But just as hope began to dawn, the massive crystal doors to the heart chamber exploded inward, and the rebel fanatics poured into the room, their weapons raised. "Give us the Pretender Princess!" The rebel leader's voice boomed over the palace speakers, dripping with contempt. "Let the glorious transformation begin. It's time to become what we were always meant to be." The queen just shook her head. "Fools," she whispered, then shouted to her loyal guards. "Hold that door. I don't care what it takes." Outside the crystal walls of the throne room, you could see it all. A terrifying light show of blaster fire. Her guards were fighting a losing battle against rebels who fought with the fury of true believers. High above the chaos, the three suns were creeping into a perfect line, a celestial clock ticking down to disaster. I can't keep this shield up much longer, Lyra said, her voice strained. This thing, it's like trying to hold back the ocean with a bucket. Just a little longer, Kale shot back. Once the suns align, we change the rules of the game. If we can't stop this cosmic monster from breaking into our world, he explained, then we're going to decide how it comes in. It'll be on our terms, not its. The Queen stared at him, stunned. You plan to bargain with a creature from beyond the stars? Not bargain, Kale corrected, frantically typing and sending every piece of information he had into their energy network. I'm going to teach it. He was trying to show the entity that they were alive, that they were more than just fuel. It's never met anything like us before, he said, his fingers flying. We have to show it that there are other ways to exist, besides just consuming everything in its path. We have to show it that sometimes preserving life is better than destroying it. Through their mental link, Lyra instantly understood his wild plan. She started changing the energy she was sending out, no longer just feeding the beast, but talking to it in the only language it understood. Pure energy. Every pulse of power she sent was a message, a story about their world, their lives, and their desperate hope to just keep living. Slowly, the crushing pressure from the entity changed. It was no longer a hungry predator. It was curious. It was like it was tasting their world for the first time and was surprised by the flavor. Just then, a huge explosion rocked the palace as the rebels blasted through the outer doors. They swarmed into the antechamber, firing their weapons and screaming about their glorious new future. The Queen's guards were pushed back, their line finally breaking. In a few seconds, the fanatics would be right on top of them. Lyra! The Queen cried out in panic. Whatever you're planning, do it now! I know, Lyra's voice echoed back, calm and clear. Lyra herself was almost impossible to see now, hidden inside a shimmering cocoon of raw energy. Through their connection, Kale felt her make a choice that was about to rewrite the future for everyone. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, she communicated to him. The entity, the rebels, every single person who wants to be transformed, they'll get their wish, but it's going to happen my way. She rose to her feet, still connected to everything, but somehow bigger than all of it. Power rolled off her in visible waves that made the air itself seem to bend. When she spoke, her voice wasn't just in the room. It was everywhere, in every mind. You wanted to ascend? She called out. Then let me show you what that really means. The rebels smashed through the final door just in time to be hit by the full force of what Lyra had unleashed. But instead of being dissolved into stardust, they were slammed with a wave of pure emotion. Suddenly, they could feel the pain of every single person who would have died because of their revolution. Every life they had taken in their blind crusade came rushing back, and they felt every moment of it. Some of them just collapsed, sobbing, completely broken by a sudden dose of empathy they'd never known. Others tried to run, but they couldn't move, forced to stand there and face the horror of what they'd done. Their leader, the man who had been shouting about evolution moments before, suddenly saw with perfect clarity that real growth comes from building things up, not tearing them down. But Lyra wasn't finished. The wave of understanding rolled outward, touching everyone in the palace, then the city, and then the entire planet. She didn't change them, but she gave them a gift, a glimpse of the universe through her eyes. They saw the endless web of connections that tied all living things together and the breathtaking beauty of simply being alive. And to the massive entity pushing its way into their world, she gave the most incredible gift of all: understanding. You only consume because it's the only way you know. Her thoughts rippled through space and time. But look at what we can give you for free. You can experience life through us instead of ending ours. You can become a part of our story without destroying it. The entity hesitated. For the first time in more years than could be counted, it had found something completely new. It had faced creatures who fought back, but never one that invited it in. It had known fear, but never a welcome. It wasn't being told to go away. It was being asked to stay and be a part of something beautiful. "It's thinking about it," Cale whispered, his eyes glued to his monitors. "The pressure is stabilizing." The three suns hung perfectly aligned, bathing the room in a brilliant, warm light. In that glow, Lyra stood transformed. She hadn't become a monster or an alien. She had become more human than anyone could have ever dreamed. She was one person and a billion souls, a mortal with a view of eternity, a living bridge between what was and what could be. "Choose," she said, her voice soft but firm, speaking to the entity and to every person on the planet at once. "Choose to connect instead of consume. Choose to grow instead of destroy. Choose to become more than what you were without forgetting who you are." Time itself seemed to hold its breath. The fate of their entire world was hanging on the decision of a being so huge it was impossible to imagine. Then slowly, gently, the crushing pressure began to fade. It didn't leave, it settled. The entity had made its choice. It would stay, not as a conqueror, but as a silent partner, experiencing life through them, learning from them. The transformation the rebels wanted had finally arrived, but it wasn't the end of everything. It was a new beginning, an evolution born from understanding. The three suns started to drift apart, their perfect alignment broken not by force, but by a choice. The shaking stopped, and in the heart chamber, Lyra finally collapsed, her mind returning to her own body. Cale was there to catch her just as his own protective gear sputtered and died from the strain. All around them, rebels and guards stood together in stunned silence, trying to understand the miracle they had just witnessed. The queen ran to her daughter, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks as she pulled her into a hug. "Did we win?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We survived," Cale answered, a small smile on his face. "And we might have just taught the universe a new trick. I'd definitely call that a victory." Looking through the crystal walls, they could see the city outside starting to come back to life. The danger was over, but what happened here would change their world forever. They had faced something terrifying and unknown, and had somehow made a friend out of it. The transformation had happened after all. It just wasn't anything like they had expected. The next few hours were strange and quiet. Reality had been stretched to its absolute limit, and now it was slowly snapping back into place. Cale found himself in the Palace Command Center, watching holographic screens that showed a mix of damage reports and completely confused messages from all over the planet. "Dimensional stability is at 87% and rising," a technician called out. "The entity's presence is still here, but it's quiet, almost like it's asleep." "Or learning," Cale said, staring at the data. The cosmic being hadn't left. It had become a part of their world, living in the quiet spaces between heartbeats and thoughts. "Imagine experiencing time 1 second at a time for the first time," he mused. "That's got to be a shock." General Thexus, his armor still blackened from the fight, stood stiffly by the main screen. 17 dead, 43 injured. Half our defenses are shot. And we've got some kind of cosmic god taking a nap in our backyard." He stared hard at Cale. "This is what you call a win? Compared to the whole planet being wiped out?" "Yeah, I do," Cale shot back, too exhausted to be polite. His head was throbbing, and every now and then his vision would blur with flashes of starlight. "Would you rather we were all cosmic dust right now?" "I'd rather have an enemy I can shoot," Thexus grumbled, but he didn't really mean it. Even a stubborn old soldier like him knew they'd dodged a bullet. A voice cut through the comms. It was the Queen. "What's the status on the princess?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "She's stable, Your Majesty," a medic replied. "Her body is changing. That connection she made with the entity has rewired her on a biological level. She's processing information from multiple dimensions at once, but she's in control. It's like she's learned how to organize infinity in her head." Cale pulled up his own screen, looking at the medical charts. The readings were both amazing and terrifying. Lyra was basically in two places at once now, mostly here, but with parts of her mind touching places humans couldn't even imagine. She had become what the entity wanted, but she'd done it her way. "I need to get to the ancient sites," he said suddenly. "The entity said they lit up during the alignment. If we're going to live with this thing, we need to know where all the connections are." "Absolutely not," Thexus snapped. "You've done enough damage for one day, human. My teams will handle it." "Your teams have no idea how to deal with this kind of thing," Kale interrupted. "But I do. Like it or not, General, I'm the world's #1 expert on living with cosmic gods. You want to try this on your own, or do you want the guy who actually knows what he's doing?" The general's jaw was clenched so tight it looked like it might crack, but before he could argue, another voice, soft but powerful, cut through the room. "He's right." Everyone turned. Lyra was standing in the doorway, leaning on her mother for support. She looked impossibly fragile, almost like a ghost, as if she wasn't quite sure which dimension she wanted to be in. But her eyes, all four of them, were sharper and clearer than ever before. "Your Highness," Thexus started to say, his tough exterior melting away in an instant. "You need more rest," the Queen insisted, but Lyra offered a faint smile. "I've been resting across 17 dimensions at once. This is as good as it's going to get." She knew how they saw her, fragile, broken by the very wave that threatened to unmake their world, but she held the key. "Kale's right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Those ancient sites are everything. They're not just power hubs. They're interfaces, cosmic translators built by our ancestors for this exact moment." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me the first dynasty predicted this?" "Not predicted," Lyra corrected, moving toward the main holoscreen, her steps leaving faint shimmers in the air. "They prepared for the possibility. I see it now. It's in the deep code of our architecture, our tech. We were always meant to be the bridge." "This thing, it isn't an invader," she explained. "It's more like a teacher we invited to a party ages ago, and we just forgot to check the mail." Lyra waved a hand, and the display bloomed into a map of their planet. Arvex. 7 locations began to pulse with an otherworldly glow. The ancient sites, every single one is now vibrating at the same dimensional frequency as the entity. We have to activate them correctly. Her voice was urgent. Right now, they're on autopilot, trying to run software that's thousands of years old. But if we can sync them up with what I've learned, she wavered, a sudden dizzy spell washing over her. Both Kale and the Queen rushed to her side. "You're not strong enough," the Queen said, her tone final. "That transformation almost destroyed you." "The transformation worked," Lyra replied softly. "Mother, I'm not who I was yesterday. I can't be," she pleaded gently. "But I am still your daughter. I'm still Lyra, and I will protect our people. Please, let me finish what our ancestors started." Kale stood back, watching the silent battle on the Queen's face. Love warring with fear, pride with pragmatism. At last, she gave a stiff nod. "But you will not go alone," the Queen ordered. "Engineer Morrison will go with you, along with a full security detail." "A small team is better," Lyra countered. "Too many minds could disrupt the dimensional harmonics. Just Kale, myself, and maybe 3 guards. And any techs who want to witness the dawn of a new era." "The dawn," General Thexus scoffed from the doorway, his skepticism like a physical force. "Or the twilight." "Sometimes they look the same," Lyra said with an unnerving calm. "Just ask any mother." An hour later, their small team was assembled. Kale performed last-minute checks on equipment that had been hastily patched together, while Lyra sat cross-legged, meditating, her consciousness seeming to flicker in and out of focus. 3 guards stood by, volunteers who had felt the transformation wave and needed to understand. They were joined by 2 technicians from the Power Core team, their faces alight with a dangerous mix of fear and scientific curiosity. As their transport lifted from the palace, the planet's 3 suns began their nightly celestial ballet. Finally freed from the entity's chaotic influence, the city below was already showing signs of life. Emergency crews were clearing rubble, and people were emerging from shelters as the crystal spires began to hum their harmonic songs once more. But the music had changed. A new, deeper resonance now underscored the melody, a constant reminder of their cosmic visitor. "First stop is 1,200 kilometers north," the pilot called out. "A place called the Throat of Stars. We'll be there in about 30 minutes. Kale used the time to pull up every scrap of data they had on the ancient sites. They were all built by the First Dynasty, revered, and studied for centuries. Each was unique, yet all shared certain features. Crystalline structures that seemed to have grown right out of the planet's bedrock. They were etched with complex mathematical formulas that were physically painful to look at for too long, and they channeled energies that modern science couldn't even begin to map. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" Lyra murmured, her eyes fixed on the blurring landscape below. "I never got it before. They're not just buildings. They're love letters from our ancestors to a universe they were just starting to understand. Love letters that could rewrite all of reality," Kale added dryly. She smiled faintly. "Those are the best kind." The Throat of Stars was a colossal spiral that twisted up from a desert of shimmering silver sand, looking like a tornado frozen in time. As they got closer, Kale's instruments screamed. The entire site was blazing with energy, pouring out dimensional waves that made the very air warp and shimmer. "This landing might get choppy," the pilot yelled over the alarms. "The gravitational fields are all over the place." The ship bucked violently as invisible forces tore at it. Through the viewport, Kale saw reality splinter into 1,000 kaleidoscope patterns. For a terrifying second, he experienced all outcomes at once. They were landing perfectly. They were crashing in a fireball. They were hovering forever. They had never even left. Then he felt a calming presence wash over them. Lyra had simply reached out with her mind, smoothing the chaotic energies until everything snapped sharply back into a single reality. "My thanks, Princess," the pilot said, his voice shaky. They stepped out onto sand that hummed under their boots, each grain vibrating to create a haunting, melodic chorus. The Throat of Stars towered over them, its surface crawling with equations that shifted and rewrote themselves before their eyes. "It's trying to talk to us," one of the technicians whispered, her scanner whirring. "The patterns aren't random. They're changing based on our presence." "Based on my presence," Lyra corrected gently. She walked toward the massive structure, and her own body began to glow with a faint, sympathetic light. "It recognizes what I am now, what we've all started to become. The entity's arrival changed every person it touched, even if they don't know it yet." She laid a hand on the spiral's crystalline surface, and the equations erupted from the wall, becoming 3-dimensional forms of light and sound. The team was plunged into a living history of the First Dynasty, experiencing it not as a movie, but as a memory. They felt the excitement of scientists and mystics working side by side, reaching across the veil of reality and touching something ancient, vast, and utterly alien. It was the first contact with the entity, a moment of pure curiosity and wonder. Then came the dawning realization that their entire species was at a turning point: evolve or stagnate, reach for the stars, or turn inward, become more, or stay the same. "They chose to plant seeds," Lyra whispered, her voice echoing in their minds. "They built these sites to be welcoming beacons for when the entity came back. But then something went wrong. Fear won. The great work was abandoned. The knowledge was buried, and the truth was twisted into myth. Until now," Kale finished. "Until you." Lyra nodded and began her work. She used no tools, only her mind, weaving her thoughts through multiple dimensions to reshape the site's ancient programming. Kale could only watch his monitors, stunned, as the energy patterns shifted into something new, something coherent. The rest of the team formed a protective circle, though none of them knew what they were protecting her from. Time became meaningless. Hours felt like minutes, and minutes stretched into eternities. At last, Lyra stepped back, her body trembling with exhaustion. "One down," she managed to say. 6 to go. The days that followed were a whirlwind of travel and transformation. Each ancient site was a new puzzle. They visited the Garden of Frozen Light, a place where photons moved so slowly you could pluck them out of the air like glowing fruit. They descended into the Singing Depths, an underwater site where sound waves became solid matter and thoughts took the form of music. They stood before the mirror of probabilities, which showed them not their reflections, but the infinite ghosts of the lives they might have lived. With each activation, Lyra became a more perfect bridge between the two realities. The entity, now fully awake, began to communicate through the sites, sending concepts and feelings that were more profound than mere words. It showed them things that would break a normal mind, civilizations it had met in other dimensions, life forms made of pure mathematics, the sheer, endless beauty of all creation. In return, the entity began to learn from them. Through Lyra, it felt the universe in a straight line, cause and effect, the strange beauty of a life that has a beginning and an end. It even discovered humor when one of the guards told a simple joke that somehow made sense across realities, and it learned sorrow when they uncovered recordings at one site that showed the raw panic that had caused their ancestors to abandon their grand design. "It's becoming more like us," Kale noted as they rested before their final stop. "Or maybe we're becoming more like it. It's getting hard to tell." "It's both," Lyra said. She looked stronger now, energized by her purpose. "That's what symbiosis is. We're changing each other." Their last stop was beneath the royal palace itself, in a chamber deeper than anyone knew existed, sealed behind doors that hadn't been opened for thousands of years. The queen insisted on coming, bringing a nervous General Thexus with her. "If this plan of yours backfires," the general grumbled as they descended, "we'll be right under the capital." "If this backfires," Kale shot back, "there won't be a capital left to worry about." His instruments were showing energy readings that made the other sites look like batteries. "This isn't just another node," he said in awe. "This is the master control. This is the conductor's podium for the whole planetary orchestra." The chamber they entered was impossible. It seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, folding in on itself in a way that made their eyes water and their heads ache. In the very center sat a device that looked as if it had been carved from a block of frozen time. "The first seal," the queen breathed. "I always thought it was just a story." "Everything's a story until it tries to rewrite your reality," Kale muttered. But even he was captivated. This was engineering on a level that made their most advanced starships look like children's toys. Lyra walked toward the seal, her steps slow and deliberate. With every footfall, her physical form became more transparent, her consciousness expanding to connect with all 7 activated sites at once. The entity's presence filled the chamber, no longer feeling alien, but like a long-lost part of themselves had finally come home. "This is it," Lyra's voice said, seeming to come from the air all around them. "The moment our ancestors ran from. The moment of choice. Do we finish what they started? Do we become the species they dreamed of being? A people who can walk between worlds, bridging realities, and serving as guardians of life itself?" "And what's the alternative?" Thexus asked, his voice stripped of its usual cynicism, filled only with awe. "We can pull the plug," someone said. "Cut the connection. The entity will leave, and we'll go back to how we were. Safe, limited, alone." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the queen stepped forward and took her daughter's glowing, translucent hand. "We have spent so much time fearing change," she said softly. "Fearing you. But fear is just another name for not understanding. She looked around at the entire team, the soldiers and the scientists, the doubters and the believers, all of them brought together by the incredible events of the last few days. I'm calling for a vote. Every one of you has seen what's possible. Every one of you has felt this change. So what do you choose? One by one, they cast their votes. It wasn't unanimous. Two of the guards chose the safety they knew over the great unknown, but the majority was overwhelming. They were going to finish what the first dynasty had started. They were going to evolve. Lyra smiled, tears of pure light streaming down her cheeks. Then let's build a bridge to forever, she whispered. She reached out and touched the first seal, and reality itself began to sing. The integration wasn't violent or scary. It felt like coming home after a very long trip, like remembering a precious secret you thought you had forgotten. The entity flowed through the network, through every person it had touched, weaving itself into the very fabric of their lives. It wasn't taking over. It was becoming a partner. It wasn't consuming. It was adding to what was already there. Kale felt his own mind expand one last time, but this time, it wasn't frightening at all. He could finally see all the connections. He saw how every tiny atom in his body was linked to every star in the night sky. He saw how every single thought sent ripples across different dimensions, and how every choice branched off into a new reality. But he could also choose to pull his focus back to the here and now, to the simple, human feeling of standing in a room that shouldn't exist, watching a young woman save her entire world, not by fighting, but by accepting. It's done, Lyra said, stepping away from the seal. She looked solid again, but different, more real somehow, as if she was existing on a whole new level. The bridge is open. We are still ourselves, but we are more. The entity is still other, but it feels like family. This transformation isn't an ending, it's a beginning. Just then, alarms started blaring all through the palace, but they weren't warnings. They were announcements. All across the planet of Arvex, people were suddenly discovering incredible new talents. Artists found they could paint with colors and shapes from dimensions that hadn't existed moments before. Scientists were scribbling down equations that proved impossible things to be true. Children were playing games that ignored the laws of physics and followed a set of deeper, more wonderful rules. "What have we become?" the Queen asked, her voice a mix of awe and worry. "Ourselves," Lyra answered with a calm smile. "Just more dimensional versions of ourselves. The entity isn't controlling us or forcing us to change. It's just showing us what's possible, what we do with these new possibilities," she beamed. "That's still up to us." They went back to the surface and found a world that was both transformed and perfectly familiar. The three suns were still shining. The crystal towers still hummed their quiet songs. People still went about their lives, falling in love and chasing their dreams. But now, those dreams could actually touch other realities. Now their songs could create harmonies across dimensions. And now, love could cross the boundaries between worlds. Kale stood on a balcony overlooking the city as it began to embrace its new reality. His job was finished. The shield malfunction that brought him here wasn't a problem anymore. It was a feature, a gateway to their expanded existence. He knew he should head back to human space, file his report, and try to explain the unexplainable to a bunch of bureaucrats who would never, ever believe him. "You're not leaving." It wasn't a question. Lyra had joined him on the balcony, her eyes gazing at the city sparkling with new potential. "How could I?" he replied honestly. "I've seen too much, felt too much. Trying to go back to a single-dimension life now would be like trying to pour the entire ocean into a teacup. The Interplanetary Alliance is going to want some answers. Then they'll have to come here to get them," he said with a grin. "It should be interesting, watching them try to wrap their heads around what we've become." "What we're becoming," Lyra corrected gently. "This is just the beginning. The entity has so much it wants to teach us, and we have so much we can share with it. Just imagine it. A whole network of conscious worlds, all spanning multiple realities. Each one totally unique, but all of them connected. Each one adding their own voice to a cosmic symphony. Sounds ambitious, Kale said. Sounds terrifying, she laughed. But it's the good kind of terrifying, she said. The kind that tells you that you're about to discover something absolutely wonderful. They stood there together in a comfortable silence, the human and the Zetha, the engineer and the princess, watching their world settle into its incredible new existence. Somewhere in the space between dimensions, an ancient being was learning what it felt like to enjoy a sunset by seeing it through their eyes. Somewhere in the palace, former rebels and royal guards were now working side by side, brought together by a new, shared understanding. And somewhere in the city, a little child was drawing pictures that existed in more dimensions than a piece of paper should have been able to hold. The transformation was complete, but the real adventure had only just begun. Down in the heart of the chamber, the consciousness core pulsed with brand new rhythms, its ancient patterns now woven with melodies from beyond the known universe. The palace was no longer just a building. It had become a living symbol of what was possible when fear gives way to wonder, when being alone gives way to being connected, and when the courage to change is balanced with the wisdom to stay true to who you are. Kale thought back to his original mission: fix a simple shield malfunction. He'd done that, and so much more. He'd helped a young woman embrace her destiny, helped an entire civilization evolve, and helped a cosmic being learn about the beauty of life. Not bad for a few days' work. So what now? He asked Lyra. She turned to him and grinned. For a split second, he saw her as she truly was, not just the princess of Arvex, but a living bridge connecting all possible worlds. A living, breathing testament to the power of transformation. Now, she said, her eyes sparkling. Now we explore. Now we learn. Now we become everything we were always meant to be. The three suns continued their slow, eternal dance across the sky. But their light seemed different now, richer, deeper, and filled with infinite possibilities that hadn't been there just yesterday. And in that light, two figures stood on a palace balcony, looking out at a universe that had suddenly become infinitely larger, and at the same time, infinitely more personal. The shield malfunction had been fixed. The real work was just about to begin.